All right, today we're tackling a phrase you've probably heard a million times, economic power. But we're not just going to define it. We're going to take it apart, piece by piece, and see what it's really made of. So let's just start there. What is economic power? The first things that probably pop into your head are a country's wealth, or maybe a huge corporation that dominates the market. But what if I told you that's just the tip of the iceberg? Because as it turns out, the real story here is so much deeper, way more complex, and honestly, a lot more fascinating. It's all tangled up in the very fabric of our social world. And here's the first twist. The phrase economic power itself, it's actually part of the problem. It kind of sets a trap for our thinking, creating this false divide in how we see the world.
We have this tendency to put the economy in one box, as this natural, objective thing of numbers and markets. And then way over in another box, we put society. That's all the messy stuff like culture, politics, and human relationships. But that separation, it's totally artificial. In the real world, you can't have one without the other. They are completely and totally intertwined.
Okay, so to really get this, let's first take a look at the old school way of thinking about economic power. For a long time, especially back in the 80s and 90s, the answer seemed pretty simple. Power was something you could count. You could literally put a number on it. It was a country's GDP, its control over oil, the size of its biggest companies. It was basically a toolbox of things you could use to force other people to do what you want. And look, that's the obvious answer, for sure. But it's also missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And that brings us to a major shift that started happening around the 2000s. Scholars and thinkers began to argue that power isn't just something you have, like a pile of cash. It's something that gets created between people. It's fundamentally social. This was this big constructivist turn. And the idea was this. Instead of just counting a country's tanks and dollars, we need to understand the shared ideas, the common beliefs, the stories we tell ourselves that give those tanks and dollars their power in the first place. Now, if we really want to understand the social side of power, we have got to talk about the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. His ideas are like a secret weapon for cracking the code of how all this hidden power actually works. Bourdieu starts with the basics, the stuff we all get, economic capital. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's money, it's property, it's stocks and bonds, basically anything that you can turn directly into cash. This is the foundation. But here's where it gets really interesting. He adds two more layers. First, there's social capital. That's who you know, your networks, your connections. Then there's cultural capital. That's what you know, your education, your skills, even the way you speak. And the kicker is that both of these can eventually be converted into cold, hard economic advantage. And all of this leads to the big one, the real game changer, symbolic power. This is maybe the most important and definitely the most sneaky form of power. It's the ability to shape how people see the world. It's the power to create the categories we all use, to decide what's valuable, what's legitimate, what's just common sense. It's the power to set the rules of the game before anyone even starts playing. But here's the crucial thing Bourdieu reminds us of. Even with these other, more subtle forms of power, he argues that at the end of the day, economic capital is at the root of it all. It takes money to get into the schools that give you cultural capital, and it takes resources to build and maintain the networks that give you social capital.
Okay, I know this might all sound a little bit abstract, a little ivory tower, so let's bring it down to earth. Let's look at how this hidden symbolic power actually works in the high-stakes world of global trade.
Think about the World Trade Organization. Power there isn't just about which country has the biggest economy. It's way more subtle. First, you set the terms of the debate through the language you use. Second, you create the categories. For example, the very idea of a developing country, that's a super powerful label. It's self-declared, and it gives a country access to all sorts of special treatment. And third, by creating that category, you've already shaped the outcome. You've created winners and losers. That is symbolic power in action. So, once you have this new lens for understanding power, you really can't unsee it. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses. Suddenly, you start seeing the world in a whole new light, and it opens up new ways to think about the most important issues we face today. And this isn't just an academic exercise. People are using these ideas right now to figure out really complex stuff. They're looking at environmental politics and asking, hey, who gets to define what sustainable even means? They're digging into race and decolonization, seeing how economic systems can keep old hierarchies in place. They're even studying feminist activism to see how the language of empowerment gets used by corporations. It connects to everything. So we've taken economic power apart and found it's not just about wealth. It's this complex social force that literally shapes our reality. Which leaves us with one last question for you. Now that you know what to look for, where is this hidden power at work in your world? In your job, in the news you consume, in the things you buy? Once you start looking for it, you'll start to see it everywhere.